We're going over the traditional box model in CSS, and when you're thinking of the box model, you're dealing with blocks, and all of our designs using CSS and HTML are made up of blocks. So if you look at this graphic right here, what is white would be the content area. What is black would be the border. And the border can be any thickness. I could have the border this thickness. Not only can I have it on any thickness, I can just have a border on the right. I can have a border on the left, top or bottom. And then the other part with the box model you have is you have the margin. And the margin's outside of the box. It stops the boxes from coming together. So, one of the reasons you can think of by looking at this and realize why it's a good idea to have a margin is this is made up of two blocks. So if you have text in here and you have no padding and you have no margins, what you end up having is you can't really distinguish between, you end up not being able to distinguish where the block ends and the next one starts. So what you'd have using the CSS box model would be something like this. And here's your padding. Here's your margin. I don't have a border in here, but I could have put a border if I needed it. I could have just put one line there if I wanted to, like a grayish line or something like that. So now I'm going to go into Dreamweaver and open up the box model CSS HTML into Dreamweaver CC. And what I'm going to do first is go to View, open the rulers. And what we're going to do is just like, your typical image editor in Adobe, Illustrator, or Photoshop, you have lines you can pull that'll snap to the edges of whatever the block is or whatever. So I'm going to pull one down, one there. Now if you just place your cursor over the actual div right here, and I'm on a Mac, so I hit Command, this gives me the size. On a PC you'd be hitting Control. So what we have here is box 1. I have, as you can see, I have all the CSS for box 2, but you have to, in order to see it, I'm going to have to put the div in, and I'm going to put it in a little later. So the first thing I'm going to do with box 1 is I'm going to go up to the CSS Designer, open it up, and I'm going to add some padding. So I'm just going to scroll down. I'm right in the layout area. I'm going to scroll down to padding, and by clicking on the link here, what that means is your whatever number you put in goes all the way around. So what I'm going to do is put in 20 pixels, and you can see right here. Now if you come back over to your box model, you see that it's expanded. These are some of the quirky type things in using the CSS box model. And as you would expect, it added 20, so I have 340 for the width and 190. So these are things you have to take into consideration when you're doing things like this. Otherwise you've built a container that's, say, 960 pixels wide. You put in a header, and the header is 960 pixels, and you put in padding that's 20 pixels. That means the header can't be 960. It's 960 minus 40 to go across. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a border. So what I'm going to do is come over here to Style, down to Box 1, scroll down to border. I see border width, and it's at medium. I want to set that to pixels. Now I'm going to add 15. Now you still don't see a border, so what I'm going to do is go to border style, because there's no style, and change it to solid. So now, as you can see, this is adding even more width to your box. So you have to take these things into consideration if you're using this. It's not all that complicated, really, using this box model. The other thing we have too is the margin, like I was talking about earlier. And the margin is outside the box, and it just, stops it from colliding with another box. What I'm going to do first is just go to the div, go to structure, my insert up here, go to div, and I'm going to add box 2. I have the CSS for it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create an ID. And the difference between an ID and a class is an ID is something that happens just once on your page. Like a header, like a footer. You only have one on your page, maybe a sidebar 1. A class, maybe you have 3 boxes at the bottom of your page or in the middle that, they're all basically going to have the same type of styles, which is type and everything like that. And you'd use, in that event, you'd use something like class. So we already have box 2 over here in the CSS. So what I'm going to do is create box 2, and here's box 2 already here. So what you already see is there's a margin of 20, and there's no margin here. Now, one other thing too is that you notice that the box doesn't touch the edge of the the rectangle. And what the browser does is it gives the box 8 pixels of distance from the edge by default. So say if you wanted to have, you created a container and it was 8 pixels down and you didn't want it to be at 8 pixels down, you would just go in to the margin and set the margin to 0, the top margin. And then you'd go directly straight up to the top. So in box 2 we already have the 20 pixels and margin, and also if you go up here and look at the attributes of both of them, we have float left. So the float is what makes the boxes, they'll work almost like I guess you could say almost like a glue, but it makes them all float to go towards the left of the browser. So if you have a bunch of boxes, they'll all line up accordingly. Like this one, the next box would be right here, and the next box would be right here. So what I'm going to do is put on the box 1, I'm going to put a margin of 20, just like the click the link so it goes all the way around. Now that works great. You can see you have it should be 40 pixels. Yep, it's 40 pixels. So now when I get rid of the float attribute for box 1 and box 2, you'll see what happens. There it is. So here's another little strange occurrence. Is when you have the boxes next to each other, you're going to have the margins double up. But when you have the boxes on top of each other, you only get you get you get the margin from one of the boxes. So what that means is you just have to increase the margin. So that's getting rid of my float, and you see what happens now with the float missing. So just go back up to float and left, and we're right back. So this is a traditional box model, and there is a new rule in CSS that will stop. You know, we started out with a lot smaller box, and adding all these things on, you know, made the box bigger. So there's a new CSS rule. It's called box sizing, and it's called a border box. And if you use this rule, it will keep the box at the same size, you know, without it expanding every time you add a border or you add padding. But the problem is that browsers like Internet Explorer, you know, fairly recent Internet Explorer browsers, don't read it. It doesn't work on those browsers. So it might be a better idea to just stick with the traditional box model, and that way you're covered. So hope that helps. Thanks. Bye.